Hey everyone, it's Andy here, and in this video I'm going to be painting a Black Templars Marshal for the Cult of Paint channel army. We had a brilliant idea that we would do a Black Templars army for the channel, and we would both contribute towards it, and so far I've done nothing, and I've left Henry to do all of the army, so sorry about that, mate. But yeah, now I felt it's my turn to add something to this army, and you know, I'm lucky that I just get to do the swoop in and do the HQ. So yeah, thanks to Henry. You can send him some love in the comments. But we decided to close this army project out. He will be painting a Dreadnought, and I'm going to paint this HQ choice, the Marshal. I think that this is my favourite modern Space Marine sculpt from Games Workshop. I think there's been a few Space Marines recently that have disappointed me because I love Space Marines, I want them to be cool, and yeah, I haven't fallen in love with all of the new designs, but I really think Black Templars are probably looking like the best chapter to pick right now, which is ultimately why we did them for the channel. But I really love this Marshal, and after building it and painting it, I feel like it is my favourite. But I'm going to do a lot more Marines after a bit of a break from Marines. I'm going to come back and do some for fun, and this is one of them. I lost the really cool head that you get with it. That's kind of like the original metal model. So I decided to go for a classic Mark 7 helmet. Still have a few of those which I need to treasure as they become rarer and rarer, but hopefully they'll bring those back one day. Anyway, so yeah, I just used the Mark 7 head, and I also used a banner, which I thought would make it look a little more old school, bit more classic, which is what I love. I primed it black, and I made some sub-assembly, so the backpack's separate. And what's brilliant about this model is you can pretty nicely remove the cloak, and I don't think it's going to have any nasty join lines. It's a tight fit, as you can see me remove it, but this is pretty awesome, and I love to see good sub-assemblies that are just possible. And you can see where the primer's missed, so I just grabbed my airbrush. I'm using the Cult of Paint Infinity with the 0.4. And I just get a little bit of black paint and yeah, just try and cover the parts where the primer's missed here. I decided I was going to paint the armor with the brush, and actually what I wanted to airbrush were the pale parts because I thought they would be more difficult. So with some Tamiya flat white, I just spray all of the parts that are going to be the pale bone-ish kind of colour. So there's this separate shoulder pad I left. You need to leave it separate so you can take the cloak on and off. And important to me, I actually did the pistol, and that's going to be yellow. And honestly, I'd rather paint the black by hand than than paint this yellow over black. So, you know, I watched the Henry videos, and I decided not to follow them exactly because then you would have the same video twice. So what I'm trying to do is replicate what Henry did on his and make it match with the army, but maybe just show you some slightly different methods, different ways around it. And then you've got some options there and just some different ways to do it. So if you've been watching the Black Templar series, then you'll know it well and the methods. And yeah, I'll just try and offer a slightly different take here. I'm looking forward to seeing it with the rest of the army, and hopefully it fits in. But yeah, the methods and the paints will be just a tiny bit different. Anyway, you see I carried on just getting a nice pre-highlight on all the pale parts. If you don't have an airbrush, then I would recommend just using some Wraithbone spray, and I would probably spray the model in Wraithbone and then hand paint the parts black. That would be my preference, how I would work, only because it's a character model and I'm willing to spend more time on the black. For the troops, you know, doing squads, then definitely watch the first part of the video. It's just a different method, and I think when you have a character, especially if it's your main character, it's nice to just spend a little bit of extra time on it, and that's the kind of angle I'm doing this video from. I decided to tackle the axe first, and that's mostly because of where it is on the model. I knew I wanted to hold the model so I could paint the axe well, and I didn't want to get my fingerprints on a nicely finished body, so I thought, let's get this out of the way. I found this reference that I like, and I decided I wanted to do the silver with the lightning over the top as opposed to the entirely blue power weapon look, and I think this is a nice balance for army painting stuff. I also think that silver kind of works better for these medieval knight space marines rather than the super full-on blue power weapon effect. And I think having the lightning over the top is a nice balance. I think if they're plain silver, then maybe that's a little bit boring for the 41st millennium. But yeah, hopefully you agree with me and you like this mix. I airbrushed Iron Warriors, which I love. Great silver paint. This is the last bit of airbrushing I'm going to do, but I really like airbrush metallics. And because it's a flat surface and I already had the airbrush out, then I thought, yeah, why not quickly spray it? Of course, you could just base coat this with the brush, but I really like metallics in particular when you've got a perfectly flat airbrushed foundation. So I'll also apologize for any autofocus issues. I've got a brand new camera. This is the first thing I've filmed with it, and I'm just getting used to it. It's got a very different autofocus, so yeah, I don't know when it's doing its thing. So yeah, if you notice that, then I will endeavor to make it look better. I wanted to tint all of the silver in blue, so it was slightly blended in the lightning. It wasn't too stark from the silver, so I gave a quick glaze with the airbrush of Aethermatic Blue, the contrast paint. And you could just brush this on again, but I like the consistency you get from just giving it a quick airbrush. I then take that Aethermatic Blue again and I start to plot out my lightning bolts. And this is a good way to practice with the translucent paint. It won't be really stark when you first paint it on, but it's nice to have big, wide, subtle blue areas for when you put the very thin, bright forks over the top. So it's just a nice way of diffusing all the lightning bolts. Then I tried to follow the pattern I painted with the contrast paint, and I switched to an opaque paint now, and this is going to be AK Blue Green, which is my favorite turquoise. It's quite nice to do sharp lines like this with because it's pretty opaque, and yeah, it's just a solid turquoise paint. And I add a little bit of water so it flows off the brush, but not super thin because I kind of want to nail this first time. I don't want to go over my lightning bolts many times and risk getting them thick. And yeah, this takes a little bit of skill to try and make the sort of different changes of angles look natural and also have the lines thin enough. So yeah, take a little bit of practice, a little bit of time. Maybe you could try it out on a practice axe before you do it on the real thing. But I just take my time, as you can see, do a few little brush strokes, clean the brush, then try a few more. You can add brighter highlights so it gets slightly brighter towards the center. I just added a little bit of ivory or some screaming skull, makes quite a nice color. And this is optional. I think it looks pretty good with just the blue-green over the contrast paint. But yeah, just adjust this to how much time you want to put into this character and how confident you feel of going over the previous lines you've just done. And you can blend it together by doing a little bit of a glaze of that Aethermatic Blue, and this just softens and ties it all together. Personally, I'm really happy with that effect, and I do like the silver with the lightning over the top. I think that's cool, and I would certainly do that again. While I was in the mood for details and I was kind of warmed up doing those tiny lines, I thought, let's get the eyes done as well. So you'll see I do a bit of a weird order here, but there is a reason to it. I'm base coating here with one of the new Cult of Paint reds. I do apologize for using a red that you can't get yet, but as it gets closer to their release and we're looking closer and closer every day, I will start to incorporate those more into my paint jobs. But you can use whatever reds you've got. Something like Mephiston Red and Evil Sunz Scarlet is similar to what I'm using, but you'll see these reds are pretty punchy. After the base coat red, I just build up with that brighter highlight. This would be like Evil Sunz Scarlet. But one paint that you can get, I really recommend, is this AK Intense Orange. It's got fantastic coverage, which is, I take it why they call it the Intense range. And this is really useful for doing sharp lines and sharp highlights for the corner of the eyes. So I use that to get a nice little bright highlight in the corner, and I really recommend this paint for this job. The Games Workshop oranges are really nice, but they're a little more translucent, so it's difficult to get those razor sharp lines in my opinion. I finished by adding a little bit of ivory into that orange and just popped that corner up a little brighter, and I did my best to do a teeny white dot in the corner to simulate a reflection in the dark part of the lens. Really difficult to do and also very difficult to film doing these little white dots, but I have done my best. Henry used Eshin Grey for his Templars, which I don't have, so I'm going to use Eclipse Grey from Scale 75, and Scale 75 can be a bit of a pain, but I do like the matte finish in some situations. I particularly like Eclipse Grey. There's a handful that I really enjoy, and yeah, this is one of them. I start to paint highlights running down the leg, imagining there's a light source coming from the right. I think that's going to suit this miniature the best. And I use a stippling motion, but I'm not looking to create visible dots as like a texture. I'm just using that motion to give me control and just really draw the exact shape of highlights I'm looking for. And this is one of the advantages of just using the brush. And I think this is nice for a character if you're just painting it for fun, but certainly for knocking out the troops, this is a little more time consuming. It's not going to be, that slow. But certainly a little bit too slow to do 20 tactical marines or something like this. But you can kind of see the pace I'm working at. I'm trying to draw the shape of highlight, expanding it, and also working on the edge highlights at the same time. And to be honest, I really enjoy doing this. I think it's important to find, painting enjoyable basically, and this physical action of drawing the shapes and using a stippling motion is where I enjoy the painting. So I'm kind of doing this mini for fun. I've been painting a lot of miniatures either for Golden Demon, where it's highly stressful and you feel every brushstroke's got to be perfect, but this is a really nice way to paint, just kind of chilled out, making it look good but not looking for perfection. The highlight color I use is Graphite, also from Scale 75, and I tried brighter highlights, but I think going to Graphite as your final highlight is enough. So my second highlight after Eclipse Grey, I'm just going to mix the two together. I'm probably going to do 2 mixes before I use the Graphite on its own. Once you've got those initial highlights in the right place and the right shape, then you just need to follow them and obviously paint a smaller area as you go through the brighter parts. But you can see, again, I'm just using that kind of stippling motion, and this just gives me tons of control. And yeah, just take your time with this, and this might look a little slow, but I found once I'd done the first highlight, it was really fast doing the ones after because you're covering such a small area. So I'm focusing on the helmet because I think that's, a focal area, an important spot. And this is my second mix with graphite added to it. So we're still not at pure graphite, just taking my time to go through the colors and build up nice layers. But I'm really liking the look of this black with these grey highlights. I really like the tones that you get from Eclipse Grey. It is very similar to Eshin, which is why I think it will match everything that Henry's done. But yeah, I'm just enjoying the motion. Pure graphite now, and you can see, I'm using a small brush, a 2-0 from Artist Opus here, and I'm just doing very small brush marks, but they have a lot of impact, and just getting these small highlights in the right place, and they're nice and diffused because I've built up the layers. I really think it finishes it off, and I'm not looking for a shiny black. I just want a kind of a worn out matte black armor, but we've got some nice light hitting it, so it's not just flat and boring, so just trying to balance that grim dark feel but with some nice highlights. You can see I finished doing little edge highlights, small details and scratches as well, and for me this is very therapeutic, just going through the layers in a nice simple way. This is how I would paint a gaming miniature, a miniature for Golden Demon. The only difference is how much time I spend on it. So with this, I'm just going to do the layers, and I'll just leave it as it is, however it kind of turns out. Whereas if it's for a competition, I would go back and I'd glaze it and tweak it, improve it. But I'm just going to kind of see how it goes and leave it. But I'm pretty happy how this is looking. It's not really blended or anything like that, but I think it looks kind of cool. If you've seen my Sons of Horus video, you'll know how I do battle damage. I'm going to do it the same way here, using burnt umber from scale again. And this isn't going to show up very well on black, but it's still worth it. It's subtle and it will be there when you look up close. But it's nice to break up some of the highlights with a few little chips. I'm going to add silver battle damage over the top of this. So this is a nice first layer. And although this is very subtle, the silver won't be. So this is a nice way to have, some kind of details to look at when you hold it up close. I then added some silver highlights and chips, and I did the rivets while I was there. I'm super annoyed this is out of focus, this clip, because I only have this one clip of it. But you're just trying to do, little tiny scratches, catching the edges, making them look like random chips, and it kind of highlights the edges, which is really nice for the shapes that you have on this shin. And I really love how this looks. It kind of, it brings the black to life a little bit more. I'm going to start working on the gun now, and I began by doing a wash of that Aethermatic Blue. You can see I did this earlier in the process, just while I was waiting for something to dry, but I'm going to try and do it, in the right order, so it's easier for you to follow. I then also found this wasn't deep enough, so I gave it a wash of very diluted Despair Green, which is a really deep colour. I absolutely love it. After that, I base coated with Rhinox Hide, which is the same paint that Henry used, but I actually have this one, so I was able to follow it. And I think this is definitely the right choice for a desaturated yellow. To keep the plasma effect simple, I just highlighted the coils on the corner, gradually adding in some Screaming Skull or Ivory. And there's so many ways to do plasma. I don't love the gimmicky ways, so I just decided to kind of highlight this corner and build that up to a pretty bright highlight as pure ivory, so it looks kind of like hot, and it still stands out quite a lot, but I'm not personally into the full-on OSL. I don't want to distract from the other areas, but I love how the turquoise looks next to that yellow. Absolutely really cool. I finished with some matching highlights, just adding some ivory to the hobgrot just across the top and a few of the edges and stuff like that. So nothing crazy, but just a few highlights to match those plasma coils. I did do an edge highlight with the turquoise, so there's a subtle amount of OSL around it, but nothing crazy, but just a little bit of a blue edge highlight on the yellow I think works. I went through all my paints to try and find the right colour that I wanted for the tabards, and I looked through a load of the Black Templars art, and there's a huge variation. You can definitely do what you want. Some were like a pure white, others a real bone, and I wanted, like an off-white that wasn't really yellow like a bone. And after searching through all my paints, I discovered I liked Rock Grey from AK. And this paint I really, really like. It goes on easily for a pale colour, and I think it's just the right tone for a Black Templar. Earlier in the process, I just base coated this all over, and I just took my time to get a really nice clean base coat. I also base coated all the silver parts with Iron Warriors, and I just kind of did that in between doing the details, and you can kind of do the base coats whenever you fancy, but I thought it'd be good to kind of get that done before I do all the details on the white in case I get some silver on there. I'm going to go over the tabard really quickly in this video because in part 2 I'm going to go into detail about different ways you can do blending, but I mixed some Gobi Brown with this, and I just gradually add the Gobi Brown in until I think I have adequate contrast. And it's difficult to learn how light reacts on things like this, especially when you're used to doing things like edge highlighting where it's quite simple, you just highlight the edges. But learning how to get a softness and a natural feel to your cloth is a really important skill, which is why I want to talk about it in a bit more detail in the next video. But I'm really happy with how this came out, and I really like the Rock Grey. I think that's definitely a colour I like. Like I said, everything that Henry did I think is perfect. but I just thought I'd offer some alternative recipes in this video rather than do the same thing. After I felt I'd shaded it down enough and I had the right amount of shadow, I started to build back up and, go back into that rock grey. So I'm layering over the top again with the same colour, and going back and forth like this is a nice way to blend. But in the next video, I'm really just going to focus on 2 different ways to do blending, and also, different ways to work out how the light works on cloth. So I really wanted to go into that subject in more detail, which is why I'm just kind of passing over it in this video. But hopefully when you watch part 1 and 2, you can see why I've done it this way. To separate the armour in the same colour from the cloth, I added some ivory, or we could add some pure white. So essentially I'm going to make this look a little shinier by having more value contrast, and I used the same paint so the tone matches, but I think just adding a little more highlighting is going to separate the materials enough from the matte cloth to the slightly satin armour. And this was pretty easy because there were only 2 spots that needed highlighting at the top of the shoulder pads. Definitely don't need to do an edge highlight following around the trim. I think that's a waste of time, but doing nice highlights on the top here is going to have loads of impact and not take much time at all. I started to paint the lantern and thought I could do a really bright orange and have the orange light up the side of the cloth, but then I decided this was going to be super distracting and it just doesn't suit the mood that I want for this miniature. So in the end I just painted it a really dark red. I would recommend Gal Vorbak, and just did it as if it was off, I guess. And you can paint like a white highlight as if it's glass with just the shine at the end, but I personally didn't think having a really bright colour would work for this. I like this mini. There's not too many details that are going to suck up loads of your time. Actually, I painted most of them with silver, which made it really quick. And there's just a couple little bits like this belt, which I painted with a dark brown and then just highlighted it with whatever. I think these features are pretty inconsequential, so whatever browns that you enjoy. I like Rhinox Hide and Gobi Brown, but I really like this mini. It looks super detailed, but actually it's quite simple when you get stuck into it. So we're almost finished now, and there's that massive purity seal, which I found really weirdly difficult to glue on. Should have been much easier than it was, but I found it quite fiddly. And I wanted a slightly different tone to the tabard. This I did do the yellow colour, so I used Decayed Bone, and I highlighted with Screaming Skull, and I just did a little bit of shading by adding Gobi Brown. So same shadow colour as the tabard, but just using that yellow base coat of Decayed Bone, you can see it is a separate material there. And I think it makes the tabard and the shoulder pads look nicer as well. A little bit more of a purer white, but still an off-white for sure. So as I've said before, I do really like the tone of that rock grey. I think it's, in my mind, just the right colour for the Templars off-white. I was thinking I really don't want to do the fake script writing down this entire purity seal. That's going to be pretty tedious. And I looked at the Black Templar transfer sheet, and there are a few little bits that you could use, but they're not really thin enough. So I decided to cut them up and just slice them all the same narrow width and try and fill as much of this purity seal as I could with the decals. These were fairly fiddly to get into place. I used Microset and Microsol. You definitely want to get both of those products, they're amazing. But it was a little bit fiddly, but I think the result is fantastic. I only had one Black Templar transfer sheet, so I didn't have enough to cover the entire thing. But hopefully you do if you're doing a Black Templars army. But I think that if you're doing these purity seals and you want the writing to look really good, there's no shame in using transfers. It's really difficult to do that writing effect convincingly. And certainly, this for me is an army model, even though I'm kind of painting it as just a one-off figure. That's the kind of level I'm looking for. I think those transfers are looking really cool, and while I'm waiting for the Microsol to do its thing, I thought I'd finish off a few of the other details. I added a little bit of a bronzy colour with some Decayed Metal and Sycorac bronze, I think. Hopefully the title is here and I've got it right. Anyway, I just added a couple little bronze areas. I'm not sure if I like them. Maybe I prefer it just all silver. I really like having a lot of silver on this mini actually. It's a little bit different to how I normally paint with a lot of metallic silver. So personally I really enjoyed it. I did the highlights by just adding in this aluminium from Vallejo. I really think these air paints brush on amazingly well. I'm sure a lot of you know that. And I just gradually added it to the Iron Warriors, and I found this is the nicest way to get a silver that I like. And I just did a few highlights where it was key, you know, like the top of the shoulders here, picking out the rivets, doing a few little dot highlights on all of the chain links and things like that. And I didn't spend forever on the silver, just 1 to 2 highlights, and this is where you save time. I really put the effort into the black and the bone, and a lot of the other details like this silver, they're not taking me much time at all. So even though it might seem like a bit of a time sink to do lots of layering and highlighting on things like the black, there isn't much to do after you've done those 2 main areas, the bone, the black, you know, the gun and the axe. So it does come together quickly as soon as you've done those things. So I ran out of writing and needed to fill some of these areas. So I tried my best to mimic this and do some little black lines. And this was really hard, to be honest, and almost impossible filming at the same time. So I tried my best to demonstrate to you me painting this, but I just needed to do it off camera, really. But I just tried my best to mimic the transfer. Ideally, you would just have more transfer sheets and you could do the whole thing. But this was quite useful for getting it to go around the corners where I couldn't get the transfer to, you know, bend. And yeah, I was happy with the final result using the transfers and a little bit of painting. But yeah, it's kind of tricky to match those perfect transfers. I don't use varnishes on my miniatures in general, but I use some ultra matte on this purity seal to blend in the transfers and make sure it was the same finish as the paint, and this really helps for hiding the transfer film. I don't want to varnish the rest because I like the matte black, the satin yellow and the metallic, so I want all those different finishes, but the purity seal is going to look wicked in ultra matte, and yeah, it's going to really help hide those transfers. And I think that's everything for part 1. I thought this would be a quick video, but we're going to be half hour just for one part, so you can see why I wanted to split it into 2, and the second part's going to allow me to, you know, really deep dive into 2 different ways of blending when I do the back and the front of the cloak. But anyway, with this miniature, I'm really happy with how it's gone. I really like the look overall. I like that there's the kind of the balance of the 2 red details in the middle, and then you've got the 2 turquoise details either side, so that's a nice little balance. And I just really enjoy highlighting black, to be honest, so that was an absolute pleasure. I really like painting in this way, just kind of relaxing. It's something that I've been missing. I've been, as I said earlier in the video, I tend to paint for Golden Demon, where every little mistake makes me really stressed out, which isn't always a good way to be. Or maybe I think I'm going to paint this massive army, which is unrealistic. So it's actually quite rare for me to just paint a model that's got no other reason to just, I don't know, be. And that means I think you can put time into the parts you care about and enjoy, which for me was the black. And then just kind of relax on the parts that aren't so important, which was the silver for me, where I just did some simple highlighting. And I don't think that it's cost this miniature much at all. I'm also pleased to show my take on Black Templars and just a few different recipes from our previous videos, but I really hope that it does match well enough with everything else, and I'm really looking forward to finishing the mini and seeing it side by side the rest of the army. If you want to see more videos from us, Henry is doing the Patreon exclusive videos on Necromunda, which is going to be awesome. So if you want to see more from Henry and some Necromunda stuff, then I would check that out. I also did this Necromunda tutorial recently on Patreon. So if you like our content, you like seeing what we do, we've got a video over on Patreon every week, and they tend to be a bit more detailed. a bit more of a deep dive. So yeah, if you like what we're doing and you want to support us, then please check out our Patreon. That helps us out a lot. Anyway, I hope you enjoyed this video. I hope you enjoy the results so far. Looking at the still photos, hopefully you can see those silver chips and highlights really make a difference. It was annoying that it went slightly out of focus when I was painting those, but I think you can see the impact here. I think when we add the cloak and add the base and some little final effects like some little oil washes, it's really going to come together and get the right feel that I would like for Black Templars. Looking forward to reading your comments, and I will see you in part 2.